Heroes of Reality podcast, a podcast about the game of life and the hero's journey we all experience. Let's jump in with our host, Dylan Watkins, as he introduces today's guest.
Are you as big a fan of LitRPGs as I am? Well, in this podcast, you're going to love this author. He is an international bestseller, Michael Chatfield. He is an Army veteran who enjoys long walks in foreign countries and some good beer with good video games at night. He writes character-driven, fast-paced series spanning fantasy, science fiction, and LitRPG. He focuses on bringing a realism and depth to stories that bring his worlds alive. He is currently working on the fantasy epic 10 Realms, following two veterans dropped into a fantasy world, the science fiction Builder's Legacy, and about a group of gamers playing in the biggest MMORPG of their lives. So without any further delay, I'd like to welcome Michael.
Hey Dylan, thanks for having me.
Hey Michael, I'm super happy and excited to have you on and to dive deep into the fantasy world of the epic 10 Realms. Now, when you were talking about doing the whole 10 Realms, or you're creating the 10 Realms, did you have the scope of it in mind? Because I know as you go through the book series, you kind of level up through the realms. Or how did you come up with the 10 Realms concept?
I think it was kind of like, you know how in some video games every 10 levels you get a new like area you unlock and that kind of thing, and the map gets a little bigger. I thought that was great, and then the problem was that I just used worlds instead of like small regions that you would have on like you know, a normal MMORPG. So it kind of spiraled from there, but it was also like it allowed me to go, okay, we're gonna have a jump and we're gonna see something entirely new, entirely different, and it allowed me to change up, like we're gonna have different kind of cities, different kind of cultures, and I just love that game.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, it's quite the scope. And for me, as I was going through the book series, and I could see like, you know, one realm closes, one book closes, kind of stepping into the next one. I really like that. But I also saw there's like a progression of different types of realms that they go through. Say maybe one's more for alchemy, one's more for war, one's more for X or Y or Z. Did you create that as an outline to kind of for staggering the power levels, or what inspires the different realms and the creation of the different worlds along the path?
Most of it was pretty organic. When I started off, the only thing I really had was the levels, how they were going to get experience, the skills, and like all the stat stuff. And then I actually wrote a test, and there was just Eric by himself. And then I didn't like that, so I brought Rugrat along for the ride, and then that kind of started the 10 Realms as we know it. But the knowing like the third realm becoming like the alchemy realm, that was just, it kind of happened. It seemed it like, you know, when you like look at something, you're just like, oh, that works, and then you just go, okay, here you go, and you're like very surprised yourself that it works, and you go, I guess this is the way it's going to be. And like I had alluded to, I think like the battlefield realm, like the war realm, earlier in like I think the second realm, and then it was like it just grew of, okay, that was an idea, but now I have to like build upon it, and then it became, oh, that's actually like, way to go, past me, like you did good, like but most of the time it's the characters who actually determine that. They say something, and then I'll get to the end of the day of like writing, and I'll go, oh, I'm gonna have to follow that up now, aren't I? And it's like the characters are just like, I guess so, sucker. And I'm like, this is my life.
Do you feel like you have conversations with these characters like Eric and Rugrat, or like, is there a thing where you actually have kind of like a mental dialogue with them when you kind of work to kind of mastermind the book creations, or do you feel like it is still you creating the actual characters?
I don't know if it's so much a conversation as like holding on to a bucking bronco and just seeing what happens. Most of the time, like I'll go and I'll have the characters do something, and I have a plan when I start at least, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure they're going to end up here at the end, and then they're just like, nope. And you go, like, you know, like classic D&D campaigns where you have like that carefully plotted out entire game, and then like cardboard cutout character, and you're like, why? Just I spent hours on this entire campaign, and now I'm just gonna have to rough it. So
Yeah.
I kind of just stopped planning stuff and just started writing the bull more and seeing where it happens. Like there's no way to control Rugrat, that's for sure. And then Eric's just as crazy, but he's just quiet about it.
Yeah. So that's other. Okay, there's several ways I can take this conversation, but looking at one being the fact that you're a D&D master, kind of making this game plan. You're like, I put all this time creating this city. You're standing outside this giant city with this huge palace, and they go, "What's that to the left? Oh, fields. We're going to go into the fields." And then now you have to kind of plan that out. You're talking about not planning, like, so there's no outline as you go to create these things. Like, don't you ever come across a situation where you write yourself in a corner, or you write yourself into a situation where you're like, oh crap, I'm now at a place where I actually haven't really thought this through, or this doesn't quite match my hard magic system? How does that work?
So I'll break it into the hard magic system and the rules of the world are always engaged. So I can't break them. So I'll always be like, okay, what's the line I could run here of what they can do? So it makes it much more D&D in that way. If you go, okay, well, I'm in this situation, what can I do in this situation? Whereas like walking into corners, that definitely has happened once or twice. Like the current series I'm working on right now, there's like moments where I go and I write something, I'll sit down and I go, I can't do that. I need to change that to like get them in at least somewhat of the direction that they're supposed to go. But I kind of set like goalposts of like there's certain events where I go, I really want to see this. Like I feel like the characters, this scene really fits them. And they like this would be such a cool piece of dialogue. It can even be, and I just go, I want to get that really cool piece of dialogue. So I need to set up that scene, which means I need to have this and this and this happen, and then those kind of things thread back, and then it's just like dragging them slightly, but then also they'll find their way. Like it's a bit of yin and yang. Of there's a goal to get there is great, but to do it too much, like every little step, it kind of falls apart.
Got it. So you get some sort of random inspiration. So imagine, I don't know, Eric is holding up Rugrat from the top of a mountain with his pants and he's butt naked or something like that. And you're like, oh, that'd be a great scene, right?
Mhm.
Then you says, okay, how do I get to that scene along the path? And they're not even near a mountain. Okay, well, they've got to find a quest or a mission purpose, seek a dungeon, and then you kind of work your way towards that goal because you really want to emphasize that moment in time. And so, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, like it's just, and you'll get to those points, and sometimes the goal will actually work, and sometimes you go, I've got a better scene, and then the characters will take you there. So you really have to kind of leave yourself open to just where is it gonna go, which makes it a lot of fun because I think that's why the characters are like there's so much to grab onto because not only is the reader doing that, I'm doing it at the same time because like I don't think really the characters are a part of me. I'm just really like when I write it, I am literally seeing the scene and it's like, you know, when you have like the 3D cam in Halo where you can like build stuff, it's literally like I pause everything and then just take a circle and go, okay, so they're fighting over here, they're doing this. So this person's doing this, and it's like, or like the Marvel where they do the spin cam, and you just go, okay, so that's how that works, and then you hit play, and then you just follow it along.
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, I'm one thing that I'm super fascinated by is this ability for authors such as yourself to be able to construct such a powerful internal world that you're actually just going through it and you're experiencing it and your characters are off to the races like Rugrat just diving into battle or doing something just like a crazy army gentleman just going off into the races. So have you always had the ability to craft these internal narrative world, or at what point were you able to kind of use this superpower?
I think it really came about by reading a lot, just like an inordinate amount of reading, because you kind of get a feel. Like you can read the quality test of 100 pages, right? You read 100 pages of book and you know 100% if you're going to like it or hate it. Usually it's more like 10, but it's like you can know where it is, right? And so like with a magic system, you've had that feeling where you're like, there's something not quite right here, right? And
Mhm.
then you go, sometimes you're like, oh, this is juicy. This is so interesting. I can understand it, and it clicks. So like, I'm building a magic system right now, and it's going, okay, how does this come together? And it's like tasting things. Like, I guess, like, it's how like a chef does it. If you taste it a bunch of times and then you go, that needs salt, that needs pepper, that needs paprika, like those different combinations to bring it together. um I think also, just like, don't let your imagination die, because like, one thing that's a good exercise I always think of is like, if you can actually like feel something, like
Uh-huh.
you can hold out your hand and like you can feel like a hemp material, and you can go, okay, well, I can feel that. That is the basis and the building cornerstone of everything. Because then you can go, well, I can feel that. I can feel it in my hand. I can feel it on my arm. And then you can go, okay, well, then I could also feel a hand grenade. I could also feel a sword. Is the sword wrapped with leather? Is it wrapped with like time? And then you just extrapolate that, and then instead of being in your shoes, you're in someone else's shoes because you're feeling the same things as them, and then it's
Mm.
just relating those two.
That's super interesting. Yeah, there is a chef in the kitchen. By the way, I used to be in the food business. I ran my own like food truck, and now I'm in the virtual reality business. So I build my own games and stuff like that. But
Awesome.
yeah, so, a grown up big kid as a profession, burgers and video games. But one thing that reminded me of is when I was first trying to figure out how to be a chef is one of the things I do is like you grab like a hard boiled egg, and then you have like a spice rack, and you put one spice on it and you taste it. You're like, that's paprika, right? That's
Mhm.
thyme, that's whatever. And what you're talking about is sampling these items to where, if someone said, okay, trying to be a chef to cook in the kitchen, but all you've ever had is chicken fingers your entire life, it's very difficult to kind of, be able to sample and know those flavors and have them ingrained in your psyche. When you're talking about sampling a lot of these different inordinate amount of books, do you continue to do that? If there's areas that you have dark spaces in your mind, do you go and sample more books still, or can you talk to me about that? How do you have that writer's palette?
Yeah, like, I would definitely say, like, um, always read, and always be comfortable to read and watch things you're not comfortable with. So, this actually came as a revelation from one of my friends, and he was saying that he like there's books and there's TV shows that he absolutely hates, and he's like, but I have to now sit down and I have to figure out why I hate it. And I was like, why do you do that to yourself? And he goes, because if I know why I hate it, I can see why I hate it. And I was like, so it's kind of like the thing of, you have to know the good and the bad to know where you sit, and is actually that thing really bad, or is it
Mm,
just you're uncomfortable with it? Like, I know that, like, in my younger years, I was like, romantic movies like P.S. I Love You, like all that. I was like, ooh, ugh, this drama, there's all this stuff going on. Why can't they just tell one another, like, be clear, like, get it across? And then now I'm just like, that's great, because the tension there, that drama, that's a specific thing that
uh,
makes that entire genre possible. And
yeah.
it's such a strength, but I hate it. Like, still, to me right now, I go, I'll be like seeing it, and I'm just like, okay, I'll watch it. But like, there's just moments where I go, like, just tell them, just stop hurting my brain and tell them. But that's the enjoyment for people, and so you gotta
Mm,
you gotta do that. Though
yeah,
I don't
man.
know if I would have like some spices, like ghost chili peppers on eggs. That might be a little interesting.
That's so funny. This is by such a boy conversation. Girls are like, "What do you mean? No, we like the mystery. Is it gonna work out?" Like, girls love to find that the soap operas, the Bachelorette or whatever the things are. They're into it. And for me, I'm just like, no, stop the drama. But we like different drama, right? We want to see the
Hmm.
power levelings. We love to see the fantasy. We really like to see it. There's points in the book series where your characters like lose their powers. You're like, no,
Hmm.
right? And then they're able to get their powers back or whatever happens. And those things for us are fascinating. And I do agree with you. I there are certain genres that like I feel uncomfortable watching that make me cringe, but
Mhm.
at the same time, I still like, I'm still face up to that in some degree. There's a lot of ones I do avoid. I definitely don't watch all of the and there's no knock. There's some people enjoy The Bachelor or whatever it might be, and that's great for them. But I never really thought about it to come from a perspective of this is making me feel something. And because it's making me feel something, it allows me to deconstruct how I'm feeling, which gives me more insights to myself. So it's not necessarily about the material, but it's about how I react to the material and understanding how that material has effect on me.
And it's also, then you can use it in two ways,
Uh-huh.
because you can say, okay, I hate this thing. Now I can use that to make other people hate something that I'm doing, right? And
Yeah.
there's also, like, when you look at it, the tension in an action movie and the tension in a romance movie is the same. It's, you have a goal, you have something that you really want to achieve, there's something blocking you from achieving it, and the good or bad of the entire thing is based upon how delicious that tension is to get that achieved goal.
Mm. Yeah, and also goes down to the motivations of the person and the player and how relatable that is for them, right?
Mhm.
If it's us, you know, uh, yearning about, I don't know, if like a female drama's the motivations for what they want is, can be around, say, taming the dragon of some male bravado, right? The rich billionaire who is abusive or whatever, the 50 Shades of Grey kind of thing, right? For us, it's like meh. I mean, uh, I may be speaking out of turn, but that to me doesn't. It's not my motivation. But the other characters like Eric in these power leveling systems where it feels like there's like this inner gamer kid inside of me who really enjoys going through the 10 realms and watching them power up and watching them cultivate and watching them grow and then watching these new things happen that unfold, and then how do they apply it in new and innovative ways. To me, that there's a thrill in it. I don't fully understand why I enjoy that. But do you, when you're creating these characters, are you constructing their motivations ahead of time, or how do you know their values and their motivations and the player sets and how to drive them through the narrative of the book?
That's a great question, and I don't think I have an answer.
Okay,
Um,
fair.
most of the time, like when I deal with the characters, like, because they're very formed, and like I'm because I'm following them,
Huh.
you can see their personalities through their actions. There's usually going to be some core traits uh, based upon their life and that kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it's about being authentic to who they are, their life, and their experiences, and
Yeah.
also it kind of shapes the world in a huge way,
Yeah.
because I know that we've all read books, and the place is great, and the character doesn't fit, or the character is great and the place doesn't fit. And
Mm-hmm.
so those two things really need to line up so that it makes sense. Like, I knew with the 10 realms that it was going to be harsh and rough. So I needed someone that could deal with those hardships, that could deal with, okay, you're not going to have running water, you're not going to have electricity, you're not going to have these mostly like basic human things that we take for granted right
Mm-hmm.
now in the first world. But it's like, when you have that, you change it, and then you go, okay, now you also got to learn a whole different system.
Mm.
So it's like, okay, I gotta have military guys doing this, because then they've got that. They're used to that nitty gritty. They're going to be able to like deal with these things. And then I know, like, just like some things, like, okay, well, he's gonna Rugrat was gonna be from an immigrant family. Eric was kind of estranged from his parents, because I was like, I just didn't want to really have to deal with him, because like there was even a feeling of like, there, like, he's in this position because he's doing like a big screw you to someone else. But yeah, it's mostly feeling. It's not
Mm.
really they're this archetype, they're this personality. But then afterwards, I can go in and I can go, okay, they're definitely this personality, they're definitely this person. But it's just like meeting anyone, right? You
Yeah.
go through a series of conversations, you figure out who they are.
Yeah. So you're discovering a bit of the characters are how they react to these different types of situations. There's a moment when there's no, it's not really a spoiler or anything, but where like Rugrat loses his abilities, right? And then he gets down on himself, right? And then he starts to do like, I think, a bunch of push-ups, right? That because he wants to be able to feel the pain, because he's got this thing where he needs to be strong for the people around him, but he's also depressed on himself. But then he puts himself through this kind of pain and suffering to get himself to kind of use that pain as fuel to go through the situation. Does that come from your military background, or does that come from understanding the character type and then driving them through this situation, going, oh, this is how he would deal with the situation of feeling powerless when he's normally a powerful character?
A combination of both, definitely. I think it's also kind of, it was dealing with like that that alpha psyche that we're always taught about is heavily reinforced of like, okay, so you have to be the top of your game. And then I know that I've seen it when there's been guys who have been injured and everyone's told, hey, you need to be at the top of your game. And so instead of actually taking an injury break, they will go 110% to prove they're not injured and then injure themselves more.
Yeah.
And we've seen that from like, there's like, everyone's seen someone who's got something to prove, and they're like, I'm just not going to care. And it's self-harm in like a proving sort of way. And yeah, I also wanted to bring it up because it was like, okay, this is a thing that happens, and now you can see the outside of it. Because I didn't want it to be like, okay, so this happened, and he's just going to shrug it off.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is actually how he would do it, and he'd just be mean to himself. He's like, oh, you're weak, get stronger. And this is like a very rudimentary way of like, well, you're going to get stronger. You're going to take this pain. You're fine with this. And it's like a self-prove to himself, which is highly toxic, but yeah.
Yeah, totally. I'm like, I think there was a moment where I started doing push-ups listening to him, like, yeah, let's go, come on, you know.
But it's motivation, and it's also like a thing of going, okay, that's how he works, that's how he operates, but he's also a good person. And it's just this like kind of situation he's found himself in.
Well, there's this masculine side of which I thought was, I mean, I don't even call it toxic, but there's this masculine side where you want to be able to support, you want to be a strong pillar with the people around you. And when you're weak, you're trying to like, do it, and you feel this pain. And I thought it was an interesting way that he channeled the pain into something that was like productive to kind of get himself to shake off that depression, and trying to shake off depression with anger. I don't know if it might not be the healthiest way to go about it. Maybe it could have cultivated or something, but I thought it was an interesting, that you're right, could happen with any type of injury, especially with army or any other type of stuff. A question about this. I've noticed that like you and TJ Reynolds and Dakota Crowd, a lot of army militarist backgrounds. What do you think is the commonality between the military background, getting into LitRPG and things like that? Is that just a coincidence, or do you think that there's a certain piece from the army or the military that aids into getting into this type of genre?
I'm not sure. I know it's heavily dominated by military guys. At least I know quite a few of them are. I think a part of it comes into, we love numbers, because like when you're told anything, like you can recite off like information about every single weapon system you deal with. So you actually have a block there, but it's also, we love video games. There's a lot of military guys who, no matter what, play video games. Like I know a lot of guys who were deployed to Afghanistan and they were playing WoW, and like other stuff, like because they were like, well, I get to hang out with my girlfriend and play WoW, or like do like stuff like that, and then it was blow off steam. Or like you'll be around the country because you've been deployed different places and you still want to play with your buddies, so you jump on the same game and then do that. I don't know if there's anything that helps or hinders it, but it might also be that like kind of the aspect of like knowing violence a little bit, because it's also like LitRPG is usually about fighting in some way.
Yeah,
and so we've been taught it. Some people have dealt with it. So that might make it a little bit easier, because it's one thing of like, I was talking to David Weber and he was saying like you can like get experience in something by either living it, which is the fastest, or researching it. And I was like, yeah, 100%. Like you have to research a lot to get into like that kind of fighting mindset. Or if you've experienced it, then it's very quick. And you don't have to be in the military to do that. But I think definitely it's probably the easiest way to get it.
Oh, that's interesting. It's an interesting trifecta, or confluence of interests and skills that come together at once. You're actually are in combat, right? You have stats and numbers and things that you care about inside there, because there is a bit of achievement based levels, ranking. I mean, there is a lot of structure to the military that makes a lot of sense. And then you have the blowing off steam by playing video games in there. And there's also that discipline thing that comes in as well, around the getting things done, being able to sit down and do a task, which might aid for you to sit down and write. And so you kind of put all those things into a pot, and then out might come a possible lit RPG author. It's really interesting to see.
It definitely, I think it makes it easier. But like even when we were starting, like all of us were just like talking to one another, and then like someone was like talked about something. I think it was James and Dakota were talking about. So James an ex-Marine and Dakota's ex-comms, right? And the two of them started talking, and then everyone around the table was like, "That guy's a Marine, that guy's Army, that guy's Navy," and it was just like, okay, well, we didn't know this because we're all wearing like civilian clothes and stuff. But then we're like, oh, okay, that makes so much sense. And we're just like, but yeah, it was a surprise to us, right?
No, don't get into a fight with a lit RPG author.
Well, you could, but it would be very funny because all of us are just like, I don't want to. we're all so broken that we're like, oh no, like seriously, like I'm gonna run the other way. I'm so done with this.
So funny. So okay, the couple questions along this line. So one, I do want to dive into the pieces of inspiration for your systems, for your magical systems. Like, what video games and other ones were the biggest inspirations for you to kind of create the systems, the magic systems, and everything around your worlds? Let's say with the 10 realms.
Definitely the two strongest have been the Elder Scrolls series. I feel like they made the system so easily and accessible. There's not a massive amount of craziness, and D&D. Now, I will say D&D to a less degree. Like I use it more as reference material. Like I'm stuck on something and I go, okay, I think that this would work, but I need something to reference against, and to go check it and do it my whole self would be like, ugh, pain in the butt. But then also like homebrews and just a lot of Wikipedia. Like a lot of the systems actually come from like smithing. I had to basically do an entire course on smithing to figure out how Rugrout was going to do stuff. And then alchemy, I was like, okay. And I like basically spent 2 years reading cultivation novels from China and Korea. And it was like, okay, I think I get how alchemy works now. And I was like, let's just make this a lot easier. And then kind of reference the two systems with Skyrim to go, okay, we're just going to simplify this to like 3 steps and then not have to deal with all of the extra stuff because science.
Well, because magic.
Yeah. That's how we fix everything. I say that as I just finished writing a hard science fiction book, and I love computing that stuff out. Numbers are fun.
How do you that's a challenge, especially in the little RPG space, of tracking all the numbers and the systems and referencing things, and this is like 50 mana points or whatever it might be to in there. Like, I mean, can you talk about how you keep track of all that shit? Like, what does that look like?
So it used to be horrible. It used to be in a notebook. Emerilia was done in a notebook, which turned insane. And then I was hanging out with Dakota and we were writing something together. And Dakota was just like, okay, so we're just going to use Excel. And I was like, huh, that makes a lot of sense. And then he like showed me his Excel sheets and I was like, oh, sir. So yeah, he basically also half taught me how to use Excel. And then it was kind of funny because like I think 2 years ago we were hanging out, we were doing stuff on our own sheets. And then I was like, oh, you can just do like the shortcut. And he's like, you have learned. And then he was like copying it into all of his formulas. And I was like, this is a very nerdy moment of like, just literally like, and it's not small. It's like 6 or 7 tabs of Excels that are all interlinked. So you'll have like, here's all my stats. That's going to combine with all of my skills, which adds the modifiers, which refer back to that so that you actually have your numbers. And yeah, someone asked me, how do I do that to make their own D&D campaign? And I like basically had to slim down everything I'd done. And I was like, I got so much better at this by like removing like 2/3 of it because it just became so confusing to do. And also hours, no, probably days of Excel worth of work per book. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I'd have to have like an accountant like on my back, like a Sacagawea backpack with an accountant on it, where I'd type, then spin over, and then have the accountant take over and then spin back. Like it feels like there's 2 different brains. You're using the creativity, the flow, the narrative going through it, and then you're switching to the Excel, to the tracking of the numbers and the data. Is it difficult to kind of merge those 2 types of brains together?
It's tricky, but it can also be fun because it's like a challenge. Because then you can go, okay, I've got this. And once you've set up your Excel and you just plug in the numbers, it becomes much easier because it's like just having like a D&D sheet, right? You plug in the numbers, you know what's coming up, and then you just go, I don't know. It's kind of like you have lines, you got to play in between them, but you're always testing how far those lines go. And if I find a way to exploit the system, oh, you bet I try and break my own systems. And I'm just like, oh, this is going to be so much fun. Like, why didn't I do this before? And then people are like, this seems broken. I'm like, trust me, it is. And I found it.
Yeah. Exploit system. Then you need to have some sort of God come in and correct it and go, not this time, and just fix it or something. Do you ever share the Excel sheets with any of your inner communities or people on the thing to kind of say, this is what I'm working on, to kind of have them cross-track to check that things are going correctly?
So I've definitely had it before where like there's people who will track through all the information and they'll say to me, hey, this is wrong. And I'll go, have to go through all of the skills and titles and stuff. And it has happened before where I've got some stuff wrong. Usually the stat sheet is right, but sometimes it's like I put in the wrong level that they've achieved, or I put in like the wrong amount of XP, and I'm like, oh, I copied it in the wrong thing, and I'll fix that. But yeah, no, I like to keep it kind of hidden because there's usually like it relates to the world a little bit, so I'm like, maybe not. But now with like people asking, hey, I want to do my own D&D campaign, I'm like, hey, here's how I get the monster experience. Here's the skills and titles and stuff. You basically got to roll for them and do like an aptitude check, make sure that they could do it. And then it's like, when you build firearms in D&D and you go, okay, well, let's do a check. Let's see how much you progressed. Are you good to go? Is there any modifiers and potions and things? And then we're off to the races.
If you were to wipe the slate clean, right, and all of a sudden, like you don't have any of those Excel, you don't have anything, right, and you're going to start fresh and make a whole new series of a book, a LitRPG book, how would you go about it, right? What, with all the lessons learned, everything you got, what would your process look like from day 1 to day 90, or what, summarize, of course, as to getting up and going in the space?
So I kind of actually have run through this really recently because I've got a new LitRPG. Well, game lit, all right? I'll say game lit, and I'll let other people decide if it's lit RPG because I know that's still contentious. Coming out next month, and it's like I went with a totally different system because I found leveling up can be really tricky in just that there's either 2 ways to go. Either it's level up all the time or level up very rarely. Which is just kind of tricky. So with the new series I'm working on, what I did was it's like FPS, right?
Okay.
Where you have, okay, in some ones you go, okay, I want to have a gun, so I need the resources to either make that gun or I need to purchase that gun, and then just work from there. So then it turns it into, it's really crafter based, because you go, okay, I need to either go and harvest all those materials to make these things to make that thing, kind of like Eve Online, or it goes, okay, well, I'm just going to spend a bunch of money to go and get those things. And then it's kind of that. It also, I wanted to do like a cross comparison, like free to play and like pay to wins, you know, and you go, oh, you cheaty son of a bitch. Like you spent all this money and you got all this really cool stuff. Like, why did you got a pig job? Like all that kind of thing. But I found that was a lot easier, because then also like all of the power levels and everything was a lot similar. Whereas when you're going with a level-based system, you really have to say, this is why they're stronger. This is their strengths. Here's their weaknesses. So for every single person that they run into in the 10 realms, they go, okay, how strong is their body? How strong is their mana? How, like, do they have much knowledge? How's their gear and stuff? And it's a huge cross comparison, which is probably easier to do in a game than it is in a book. But you kind of just get a feel for it, like an eyeball of like, okay, they're going to be in this area. I would definitely do probably more of an Overlord thing, of like Overlord where they have like different ranks of, hey, you're in this bracket, and that works. Because
so if I understand you correctly, just so maybe take a step back from this, what you're talking about is, say there's different styles of leveling in a game. One being like you have these levels, or you have tranches, right? Where he who fights with monsters, right? There's, you know, iron, bronze, you know, silver, gold. They're the more epics, right? And it has that inverted slope that just takes, it's quick to progress in the beginning, and then other ones take decades in series, right? So it could take, you know, dozens of books to get to the end of the series, right? So that's, you're talking about, you'd prefer that style, right, of the epochs, or the different moving through these areas that kind of invert over time. So it takes harder and harder to get to the like RuneScape style, well, to a degree, where just it's harder to level over time. But then I want to kind of look at, that's the structure, but how do you get started? Do you research the genre, then do you map out an outline, do you look at your characters, then do you plan the magic system? What does it look like from the overall structuring of actually creating this book?
Yeah, great question. So usually it's, okay, you start with the characters and you go, what's their personality like?
Okay.
And then you go, okay, this is who they are. And then you'll just kind of, at least personally, I kind of go, okay, so what's their life like? How did they get to this point? And by doing that and the experiences, I'll go, well, I'm pretty sure they're going to have like this kind of magic, this kind of system. I feel like the reason that body cultivation and the East versus meets West system that came in the 10 realms was because of the characters. It made it because they were like, let's learn this system. So it allowed you to really get into the depth of it and to allow more numbers. It's what works with them, because I don't think you could have Eric and Rugrat in a completely Chinese cultivation series, because they would just be like, I gotta wear robes all over the place. Like, am I wearing underwear at the same time? Like, what's going on? I am so confused. Like, their characters would just be like doing dumb shit for like literally the first 2 years of just like, I am I drinking tea? Like, what's the right way to, because they've got none of that societal stuff. They're fucking out for days. So
I picture, by the way, it was like, I picture like Rugrat in Japan wearing like American Speedos, asking for ketchup on his sushi. You know, those are the things that I'm picturing as you're describing this. But please, as I just want to get that visual out of my head, but please continue with what you're talking about.
Just putting it into other people's heads.
Yeah, I had to get out of my head. Please, you take that. I don't want it. You take it.
It's that thing of like, you know, like you see that scene, right? You saw that scene, if you go, oh man, Rugrat is totally out of, like, he's this is not his comfortable place. This isn't the place where he can like be himself. So it's meeting that kind of, it's a little different, but it's a little the same. And yeah, it's a playground, really. Like you
Mhm.
go, like you like it also depends on what kind of situations you want to throw them into, because
Mhm.
you have to give, like, the system is their tool to win or fail, and
Mhm.
everything's going to be based upon that. Their emotional side of things is going to be adjacent to that, but also interrelated to it. So yeah, definitely match the characters to the powers so that they work well together, and they can also explain it, and they can also bring you in deeper. Because if they're not interested, if the characters aren't interested in the system, the readers are lost. They're like, well, I don't. Am I supposed to care about this magic system? Does it make sense? I don't know. It doesn't make sense to these guys. So yeah, like getting into the nitty gritty was like Eric's thing.
Yeah, and I remember them talking about cultivation techniques and how they can level up and what does it look like, and the evolutions of who they are as they get through the levels, and the desire to grind, right? And every gamer has a desire to grind up their ranks and game the system as well. I mean, it's one of the reasons
Mhm.
why, like, we love a montage, like Rocky Balboa. Like, we love to see progression. We
Yeah.
hate the wait, right? So Rocky Balboa punches a punchy bag for 60 seconds, and it's 6 months worth of work. We're like, oh, thank you so much. That's amazing to see. And I think there's an interest in seeing the progression, but it not being so much of a grind for the listener to go
Mhm.
through. And then you're talking about, and part of that is being passionate from the person who's actually living it inside your book world, to be able to understand it and enjoy it, but also make it entertaining for the
Yeah.
reader. Yeah. What you're So that makes sense as part of what you're doing. You're looking at the characters, you're looking at their life's journey, then you're kind of looking at the system that you're creating and the experiences you want them to have, and you're going to run them through that system and the experiences you want them to have based upon their journey, and go, how do they mesh with that world, and then how do they take that world and embrace it to make it their own. And is
Mhm.
that almost like, there's kind of like I don't want to say a narrative trope, but there's a way that, like, I'm a ballerina from across the street, I'm going over the hood. I'm a white girl, he's an African American. I'm going to come over and take my ballerina skills where I'm originally rejected to be a part of the rapper. And then I can integrate my ballerina skills into this rap dance and then make it awesome. Is that kind of what you're talking about how there's this American ness of these characters, and they're bringing it into this Chinese cultivation-esque area, but they're kind of then making it their own? Is that what you're kind of referencing when you're talking about that?
So, well, like the systems, so the way I made the 10 realm systems was actually a matching of, I really love Eastern cultivation and Western
Mm.
magic systems. And it kind of started as a thought experiment of like, could these two like work together? And it was, okay, well, we'll have cultivation, but then we'll have experience. And we'll have mana, but it's actually chi or ki,
Mm. Key. Mm.
right? So then it's like, okay, let's match up these little pieces. Like instead of alchemy, like instead of like potion making, it's alchemy, and
Uh-huh.
and like the same stuff with like, okay, let's like building the systems so that they worked nicely with
Mhm.
one another.
Mhm.
That was a lot of fun. Also
Yeah,
took a really long time to do.
I bet.
Um, it was like months of like, I was going through Emerilia at the same time, and I was like, so this would be a really cool magic system. I have no idea how it works. And then it just kind of like bit by bit, it would be, okay, this could work, and this could work, and this could work. And then I was like, well, who the hell would survive in this world? And that's how Eric came to be, and then
Hmm.
Rugrat came along with him.
Do you, when you're creating that process, is that a whiteboard? Is that notes? Is that everything in Excel? I mean, what is that process of creation of blending these two? You write, okay, a Venn diagram with all the Western things on the left and the Chinese on the right, and you're just trying to get them together, or what does that actually tactically, practically look like?
So I use a lot of things. The one thing I have is like it's basically an online kind of throw board where it's every idea that I have, and I'm like, oh, that'd be a really cool scene. I throw it in there. Sometimes I'll be watching movies, sometimes I'll be listening to music, and I'm like, this would be really cool for this kind of thing, and I throw it in there so that I'll pick it up whenever I have other ideas. It's kind of like sandpaper, of like it goes, okay, well, these ideas are here already, and I can run my other ideas against them to see if they actually are good enough and they're smooth enough to continue on to the next stage. Then I have I'll usually just sit there thinking about things, like not like I'll be doing my day, and I'll be like, oh, this is going on. This is a thing in the back of my head. So even as I'm like writing another series, I'm like, that's really cool. I'm not gonna actually focus on that right now. I kind of like let it build, and if after like a year usually, and it's still there and it has like more physicality to it, then I start going, okay, what's the systems? Let's start writing stuff down. Let's put down the Excel for how this would work. Let's put down the characters and see how they would work. Most of the time, it's like I just have a pen and paper and I have a notebook with me wherever I go, and I'll just write down the characters. And I'll write down the characters new again, probably like 10 or 20 times, just because I'm like, okay, well, I thought this, and actually it's this. Or two characters that I had on different series will actually become one character in this new series. So characters will come from anywhere, or even it'll be in that idea phase, that premise list, I call it, the sandpaper one. That'll have, this would be a really cool character. And I go, that I'm going to take it and I'm going to put it in this because that would be great for this book.
So then you're having these different phases. So it sounds like there's like an inspiration moment or kickoff that then goes into a research exploration phase where you're kind of exploring, you're putting things down in this throw board where you're kind of chucking things in, you're researching, you're just kind of letting yourself explore what's possible, and then you kind of writing things down, rewriting them down, testing them against old cool ideas that have an emotional appeal, and you're kind of doing that and down until you move into the actual phase of execution of writing the book, right? Or going through the book. What does that phase look like? The actual kickoff and writing the book phase look like?
So I'm going to say something that James and Dakota are going to hate me for.
It's great.
I've started. So it used to be I'd start it and I just go through to the end. And then what I found with the 10 Realms was I started and I had like 3 false starts. So I wrote it and I was like, okay, Eric's by himself. Eric has like, it was so much easier for him to progress. And I was like, nope, we're going to take that apart. I was like, that doesn't work. Then I had it change again. And I was like, this one doesn't work either. So it came down to, okay, Eric is going to have this happen on Earth, and he's going to be transported here with Rugrat because the two of them as characters together work so much better. And then the teacher figure got transplanted and changed into another character. And so it was like the pieces were there, the combination wasn't. So it was that I had to be okay to say it was broken. And it was like each of those rights was probably 100,000 words, which is why like James and Dakota would like punch me. Cause like if I told them, they'd be like, you had the words and then you started again. And I'm like, yes. But it's because you're finding the tone, right? Yeah. You're getting to know them because there've been a concept and they're super shiny. You're like, they're like this. As soon as you start writing them, they're like this. And you have to like match that up and be okay with it. And so they like hit that happy medium where you're like, okay, they're not going to be either of these things because this is the perfect person. This is a horrible person, and this is the person they are. So it works out like, but you like got to be okay with failing.
So you had 2 false starts of 100,000 words, which I don't know. That's a start. That's quite you're moving through a hefty book series right there. Not a book, a hefty book at that point, or at least the beginnings of it. When you're talking about that, what is the timeline? Like, how long did it take you to write like the 2-week curse, or like what is like a timeline for starting a new book series from ideation to, okay, I'm a throwboard this down to actually having the book completed? What's that timeline look like?
Okay, timelines are going to be tricky. I
Uh-huh.
would say the idea to execution should be long. If like the longer that is, okay.
Mm-hmm.
There's two parts of it. There's one, you have to make sure that idea actually works. And two, you have to make sure that it is interesting enough that it will hold you for a long period of time. And three, you need to start the damn thing. So as long as you have those three things, you're good to start executing. You should start writing before you think you're ready, because as soon as you start writing, the problems will show up and you can clean them out. But you need to take that kind of, it's okay for it to be screwed up right now. I can fix this in post. Right? So be okay with failing. And it's not going to be perfect. It's like any piece of art. You have an image in your mind, it's not going to be that by the time you're done. That said, once you finish the first book, that's when you can start putting down timelines hard. Otherwise, before that, it's set targets and achieve those targets. But as soon as you've done the first book, then you can go, okay, you're established in the world, you know the characters, you know the systems. It's that's going to be where things start picking up.
What do you think are the biggest roadblocks or misconceptions that people that want to start writing, or people that want to get into the space, what are the biggest things that stop them from actually completing that first book and getting it out the door?
It's not perfect. It's not as good as I wanted it to be. Like a lot of it is self-doubt and disbelief. What I would say is, and this is the challenge I always put to anyone, is, are you going to not do this thing and regret it later? Like the number one thing that people talk about, and I know I've probably said this a lot, is the number one thing people say on the deathbed is, I regret not doing. I know that's why I started writing the very first series, the Fleet series, because I was like, I've been messing around with books for a long time. I don't know what my life is going to be like. I was doing other stuff at the time, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to write this book. I'm going to finish this book, and I'm going to publish this book. Saying those things, execute upon them, and then going, like, at any point, I was like, I can take a pause now. I should slow down, or all this stuff. And that doubt continues throughout. Like even now writing, I don't know, like the 45th book or something, like that happens every time. But I go, hey, do you want to finish this? Like, are you going to be on your deathbed and go, I really regret not releasing that, or I really regret not writing that? That's the core thing. If you wouldn't regret not publishing it, that's fine. Then you don't have to. You need to be brutally honest with yourself. And I think that will empower you to go, you know what? It might be uncomfortable, but I'm willing to go through some of that discomfort to do something that I will truly love and enjoy for the rest of my life, and kind of do it in a selfish way, because like start off selfish, because at the beginning you are the only reader. By later on, you can go, well, I'd regret not giving the reader the next book. At the same time, like, be nice to yourself. Like there's a lot of people who like overwork themselves for all of this stuff, but yeah.
I mean, it's really interesting you say it that way. Is the motivation, because there's the comfort is the thing that stops us and go, it's not perfect. The self doubt, the shame, and say, okay, but will I regret this later? And also selfishly, I am going to complete this book for me to get started, right? So you do it selfishly just to get started, but then you're then of service to people, because the desire and the demand for everyone going, hey man, what happened to these characters? You said there's 10 realms and I only see 2 realms and it's been 10 years. What's going on, man? And so, so it selfishly gets you started, but then of service keeps you going.
And
Right?
it becomes like a beautiful cycle if you maintain it well, of people asking you, hey, where's the next thing? And you go, here's the next thing. And it's kind of like you're in the secret club of, you can go, I've got something you don't, but I'm going to share it with you and it's going to be awesome. It's going back to that tension thing. You're like, hey, it's been a little while, but we're going to give you that thing and it's going to be sweet.
Yeah, you book tease.
Yeah. That's the entire, that's what an author is. It's 90% writing, 80% book tease.
Yeah, I love it. And you're starting 45 books. When did you start writing?
I think I started writing 7 years ago, and I think it's like between 40 and 50, but then I think there's also like 5 books, just 3 series and 5 books I think that I haven't released, just because it was that kind of idea thing, and I went, this isn't what I wanted it to be at all. Yeah. And I went, okay, I'm just going to put that to the side. I might take it up later, but I might not.
So it's like, am I doing the math right? That almost 7 books a year ballpark? Is that 7 times 7 is 49? Right? Is that what we're talking about? So you're doing 7 books a year. So you're doing a book almost every 2 months. Every 2 months you're kicking out a book.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
What does your daily look like? Can you wake me up with you wake up, do a large amount of cocaine, and then just write the entire day, or what is that? What does it look like for you?
It's pronounced caffeine.
Sorry, it's the accent. I apologize.
No, so yeah, like wake up. I wake up pretty early just because there's less people around to like ask for stuff. But then I write with people here in Europe anyway. So like I live in Canada. A lot of my friends are from Europe, from around the world, and so we write together, which is also like they're all like loud and chatty, which is awesome. But it's also like, okay, like we found people. But yeah, wake up in the morning, have breakfast. Usually, like what I used to do, I would really tell people not to do this.
Okay.
Don't do your emails or your Facebook or anything like that when you start. When you start on something that's like either the task you're supposed to be doing or something very adjacent to it. What I do is I start reading. I'll have my breakfast while I'm reading a book, and then finish eating, start sprinting, and I sprint for 7 hours. And then it's like a sprint is usually 25 minutes of writing, 5 minutes off, and then repeated. I do 50 minutes of writing, 10 minutes off, repeated. I would not do the 50 minutes and 10 unless you've done it for a little bit. 25 and 5 is a great place to start. It holds your attention. You can run to the bathroom. You can do other stuff. Also, like when I have that 5 minutes off, I actually read. So I get to write what I want to, and then I get to read, which kind of like
reading your material or reading something different?
Something different.
Okay, so you're writing. So you're pick up a different book, whether it's your book or a different material. Consume that. Timer goes back. Go back to that, and then you go back and forth on that for 7 hours.
Yeah.
Huh. Caffeine the whole time. Lunch breaks, no lunch breaks. Like.
Yeah, like in the like what I'll do is I'll grab coffee and stuff. Like I'll start off the day with coffee, have like tea or stuff throughout the day, like whatever. Like in those 10 minutes that I have off, essentially. And if there's like important stuff, I can do the emails then. I get to the end of that, then it's gym, lunch, emails, and then the rest of the day is clean up admin stuff and do meetings, and then that's my day.
Got it. Okay. That makes 7 hours of writing a day, sprinting 25 minutes every second. So you're doing 50 minutes sprinting per hour for 7 hours. I mean, even say 6 hours. Okay. Now I see how you're knocking out a book every 2 months. That's a lot of output. I mean, it's more so than I think a lot of people can do. I mean, I imagine amateurs versus your level of ability to have that attention and focus is really interesting, because I think a lot of amateurs want to write, but they'll spend 10 minutes writing, mess around for Facebook for a couple hours, maybe put another 10 minutes, whatever thing might be, but it's not that level. How would you recommend for someone to get to that level of like focus and discipline? I mean, do they put their phone in a lockbox, or what would you think to get someone to start to get to that point of that level of focus? I think because that's a really, I mean, now I can understand how you can output so much, but how do you recommend someone get to that level?
Number one is to remove distractions. So like, that's why I don't check my emails or Facebook or any of that stuff in the morning. Like, I don't check my phone. Like here's the thing. If an emergency or something incredibly bad happens, right? Is it going to be different in 7 hours than it is right now? Like, that sounds terrible, but I know that I don't have to run off to go jump in a truck and go blow something up nowadays. So I know that 7 hours, really, it's a day. Not much is going to happen unless certain circumstances, right? So get that out of your brain. That's first great thing, but it's also because as soon as you start jumping between a bunch of different things, I feel like your brain starts chunking smaller. So it goes, I have to answer this email, so I need this information and this information, this information. But it's like that kind of information. And your brain has to jump all those little jumps, right? And then when you sit down to write, whereas you were doing a lot of tasks for 5 to 10 minutes long, now you have to do a task that's 25 minutes long. Your brain's like, wow, this is so long. It's like listening to an audiobook compared to listening to music on a very long trip. When you listen to an audiobook, I feel like it goes faster, but I think it's because it's a larger amount of content and it's continuous. And you go, wow, that hour went by so quick. Whereas an hour of listening to music can be pretty slow sometimes.
So the amount of books that you're writing and creating, I mean, there's a drive there. There's a motivation behind it. There's a dedication to that. Is there a holy grail flag in the sand, or flag on top of the mountaintop that you're trying to achieve, or do you have a holy grail purpose or a big goal you're trying to achieve by all of the writings that you're doing?
No. Like at the end of the day, like it's a love-hate relationship with writing. I love it.
Yeah.
As it takes up a lot of my life. I don't know if I hate that, but it's just a thing now. But yeah, no, like I get to write incredible stories, and at the end of the day, if I could still be writing right now, and it would just be for my own pleasure, and that would be fine. The only difference is really when I said I'm going to go publish this, and I published it. But for me, like a holy grail, I don't think so. I'm still learning. Like, I think that I'm very new to this. Of like, there's so much more to learn. There's so much more to get better at, and for me, it's just the excitement of like, this is a weird thing, but I get so excited to get to the point where I can write a single page and someone goes, I love it. Like it grabs them and then holds them throughout the entire story. That to me is so much fun. And it's so much enjoyment to me because I know I've had that with other books. And yeah, that's my goal. I don't know if I'll ever get there because it's like a moving yardstick. Because I'm like, oh, that was pretty good. Next one. And that is the next one. Yeah.
So you're trying to achieve that holy grail like hook where someone reads and goes, oh my God, this is incredible. And that polishing of the stone, right? That you're rendering something down, boiling something down that is so tight, so compelling, so hooking, so engaging that you can give this to somebody and then they just absolutely love it, and that's the moving goalpost is that engaging content that's so well written that you make someone to a voracious consumer of it because of it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think the one thing to focus on is always focus on the craft, focus on the thing that you do and only you do, and just enjoy it, get stuck into it, and do it again and again and again. Because like it pays back dividends in so many ways.
You say late pays back dividends?
It pays back dividends in so many ways of like, like you're never like, unless it's a bad thing, but you should like, if you're doing something you love and sharing it with other people, it's a great time. Like, of course, there's going to be people who like say, "Oh, this is horrible," and you go, "That's okay. Not everyone's going to like it." And actually, when people say it's horrible, and you say, "Where is it horrible?" that can help out a ton, because then you go, "Ah, there's a bit of roughness there. I can fix that now." So yeah, no, it's a crazy job, but it's a heck of a lot of fun.
Yeah, I can feel it. If that's the holy grail, or this is the ever moving goalpost of trying to create that ultimately engaging, the 7 words that you could whisper into someone's ear so that they fall in love with you or your book series forever, right? And trying to get that down to that point. What is the dragon? Like, what is the big thing that prevents you from achieving that goal? Is there something that you feel is seemingly insurmountable, or something that you need to transform yourself in order to achieve that goal?
I don't know if it's insurmountable. I think it really comes down. I don't know. There's 2 things: craft and time, and having good people to tell you about craft and to tell you where it went right, where it went wrong, and also the time to play with it and know it and understand it. And I don't mean that you need to be writing for all that period of time. Some of the best writers I know are actually voracious readers, and then they started writing a book because they know the content so well. Then they wrote it, and then you're like, this is amazing. It's like that with everything. If you listen to music, you really get into it, you love it, and you like live and breathe it, then you could actually possibly make a good song. Or you could learn something within that sphere that will help make that amazing song. Like there's so many parts and pieces to it. Like editors, copy editors, dev editors, it's a massive thing. There's not just me back here kind of thing. And rely on those people and have that support, definitely.
That's awesome. Michael, this has been awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to let people know about before you tell them how to get a hold of you?
So we did a little bit of announcement, I think last Wednesday now. But we have a new series coming out next month. So the 10 Realms is still going on before everyone freaks out about that. We have one more ebook to go with the 10 Realms. We have lots of audio coming out because we're re-releasing all of the old books. And we've got the new ones coming up. So we've got new audio coming out next month, but we've also got a new series coming out, which is called Builder's Legacy, which is going to be, I'm going to say game-lit, but I don't know if it'll be LitRPG. We're going to leave that up to the fans to decide, but it's going to be science fiction based, which is fun for me because that's going back to how I started writing. And yeah, it's really quite fun. It's kind of like a mix of EVE Online with The Expanse. If I was to make a comparison. So if you're at all interested in science fiction, if you like guns and MMOs and RPGs, definitely go check that out next month.
Awesome. And Michael, if people want to find out more about you or the books that you create, how do they do that?
So I have TikTok, Discord, Patreon, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you want to go check those out, I know that Dylan's got links and things, so he's helping me out a huge way there. So if you want to go check that out down below, wherever that may be. I never know where these link things are. And thank you so much for having me, Dylan. It's been so much fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolute pleasure. Yeah. And when we post this on the Heroes of Reality website, you'll be able to go down below. There'll be links down there below so you can find where Michael and all of his book series are. So, Michael, it is absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It's been really fun jamming with you on this topic. Have a blessed and beautiful day, my friend, and I'll see you on the other side.
Cheers. Thank you so much for having me.
You too, brother. Take care. Bye now.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes of Reality podcast. Check out heroesofreality.com for more episodes. While you're there, you can also take the Heroes quiz to find out what kind of hero you are. Or, if you have a great story and want to be on the podcast, tell us why your hero's journey will inspire others. Thank you for listening. See you on the other side.